please tell us like what exactly has been your cricket journey so far, and like when and how did you decide to become a cricketer?
Yeah, no worries. So I was born in Japan to a Japanese mother and an Australian father, and I was there through my childhood. Before my family moved to Australia when I was around 6, I probably hadn't played much cricket at that time. I don't think there was too much cricket being played in Japan, but yeah, I was fortunate to come through the Australian pathway in Queensland. I played youth cricket for Queensland at under 12, under 15 and under 17 level. Played school cricket at Brisbane Grammar School, and then I joined Northern Suburbs District Cricket Club. So, you know, some of the players that have played at Norths over the years, Nathan Horrocks, James Hopes, Joe Burns in more recent times, and then you know, Nikhil Chowdhury, Josh Brown, Nathan McSweeney have sort of made their mark over the last couple of years. So that's the team that I'm currently captain of. And yeah, in terms of the Japan cricket stuff, I first got in contact with them when I was 18, I think. So went over to Japan and saw everyone there. And ever since then, I've been going back every year at least. I'd love to live there again. And very, very honoured to have captained the team over the last couple of years in international cricket.
So like for our viewers, like can you just make us understand this thing, that what exactly is the difference between when you are a part of the Asian Cricket Council and like when you are a part of the ICC East Asia Pacific Development Region?
Yeah, I guess the core difference between the ACC and the ICC is that the ICC has a global lens in terms of developing the game and growing cricket, whereas the ACC is specifically focusing on growing the game within Asian regions. And as long as you're a member of the ACC, you get opportunities to play and to qualify. And essentially, it doesn't matter if you're ranked 100th in the world. As long as you win enough matches, you will have the opportunity to qualify towards the Asia Cup. So, the key difference is that as I keep saying, whether it's at men's, women's, or under 19s level, the Asia Cup is the pinnacle of the ACC, whereas the ICC obviously has the World Cup and other international tournaments that include other countries.
Yeah. So, like, let's suppose Japan has wants to qualify for the next T20 World Cup. So like what exactly would be the pathway? Like will you guys go through the Asian championship or like whatever the championship would be there for the Asian teams, or like will you be going through the East Pacific tournaments?
Yeah, so we'll be going through the pathway that we went through last time, which is through the East Asia Pacific region. So for context, last time in the sub-regional, we hosted that in Japan. We hosted South Korea and Indonesia. We won that and went through to the regional final where we came second to Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea are going to play the World Cup next month. And our next sub-regional is in September, I believe, so of this year towards the 2026 World Cup. So the qualification and preparation for that really starts now for our squad.
So like Japan has something called Golden Week.
Yes.
Like can you explain that for the viewers in India, like what exactly is Golden Week and what kind of cricket do you guys play during that particular week?
So Golden Week in Japan is a collection of public holidays that are all seen at the same time, essentially. So rather than having 4 different Mondays off throughout the year, they have this Golden Week, which essentially allows workers to take a week and a half off their jobs and travel domestically. Because I know experiencing it, I went to Osaka recently in the south of Tokyo, and it was absolutely packed full of not only international tourists but domestic tourists as well. So it's a series of public holidays which are observed at the same time. And in terms of the cricket that we played, we had national team training camps before that. We had the Japan Futures League the week before the Japan Premier League. And as I said before, the Japan Premier League is probably the highest standard domestic competition that we play, and we invite a few players from overseas. And this year, for the first time, we actually had Josh Brown come over from Australia. He scored 100 in the first match, which was pretty cool for everyone to observe. But no, it's a strong competition that's getting better every year.
So obviously you guys are not playing list A cricket on an international level. So what exactly do you guys have any tournament list A tournament in Japan, or only T20 tournaments are there?
So the domestic league, the Japan Cricket League, is a 40 over competition. But outside of that, we've got a T20 competition, the Japan Cup, and also a T10 competition. So there is a real emphasis on us improving our short form cricket, just because that's the most common format that we're going to be playing at an international level. So we are really trying to focus our domestic leagues to fit that.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you this thing, currently IPL is going on, and as I hope you might have seen a few matches currently, and the team, the Sunrisers Hyderabad team, they scored around 280 runs in a match at the start of the tournament. So do you has there been a shift in the approach made by teams across the globe in T20 regarding how the batters approach the game? Do you feel anything like that?
Yeah, I do think so. I have watched a little bit of the IPL this year, and it's blown my mind. Some of the scores are just getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, you touched on the Sunrisers, but there was one game that I watched, and I think Sharma and Head put on about 120 in the power play, or some ridiculous score.
Yes.
And I think they've done that a few times. So, and also in the IPL with the impact player rule, I'm sure that batters just have a license to go even harder than they would have previously. So I don't envy being a death bowler or a fast bowler at the moment, especially in the IPL. But on the whole, I do think there probably is more of a shift towards all-out aggression in T20 cricket, and we saw it against Hong Kong a little bit in a couple of the games where we've had a good start and we've managed to get some wickets early, but the middle order just keep going hard. They take a lot of risks, but risks tend to pay off in T20 as long as you've got some skill there. So I do think there is a little bit of a shift, and we've probably gone away from that anchor role, so to speak, in the top four where someone tries to bat out the innings. I mean, Virat Kohli's been unbelievable in this in this IPL in terms of his numbers, but I still see the criticism of his strike rate, which is incredible considering he's the run scorer in the whole tournament. So I do think there is a real focus on strike rates, six hitting, and we see that all the way from the IPL, which is the pinnacle of T20 in the world, in terms of franchise tournaments, all the way down to associate cricket. So yeah, definitely.
So do you think this particular thing, the strike rate thing, or people the batters going berserk from the very first ball, do you think this thing will be there in the upcoming T20 World Cup?
I do think so, although the matches played in the US, I think batters and teams will be a little bit wary of the conditions, and they'll probably want to see how those wickets play early in the tournament. And then in the West Indies, you'd think that spin will play a pretty major role there. But on the whole, I do think that the power that these batters have these days is immense, and batters don't need to get 100% of it to clear the boundary. So I do think there will be aggression. In saying that, the last 50 over World Cup, as a supporter and as a fan, I really enjoyed the games that were sort of 250 plays 230 on a really tough batting wicket. I think they're really interesting games of cricket, but at the same time, I can't lie, I love seeing the sixes as well. So I do think it'll be aggressive.
So this, you are speaking being a batter, if you were a bowler, let's suppose you were a bowler, how would you have loved the things that is going around right now, batters, how batters are dominating right now?
No is the short answer. it must be hard as a bowler seeing the real mishits go for six. I mean, when it seems like you've beaten a batter in flight, or they haven't picked up the length, or you might miss a Yorker by a metre, but it can still go for six. That must be really frustrating. So I do think some of the grounds in the IPL look tiny. So I would love to see uniform boundaries across the competition, or something in the bowler's favour. I think the impact player rule probably isn't required. I think the scores and the batting is of a high enough quality that we don't need to make it even harder on bowlers. But I mean, I'm definitely not jealous of any bowlers bowling in T20 at the moment.
So do you have any favorite ground here in India? As you talked about some tiny boundaries, so are there any favorite venues where you would love to play in future?
I mean, all of them. I've never been to India. I would love to go, but just the sheer noise at these venues, I would love to experience. And the first one that comes to mind is probably in Chennai, especially when Dhoni walks out to bat. It's just I would really, because I've watched Dhoni bat at the MCG and also at the Gabba, and even at those venues, you can, it's just almost manic atmosphere, and it's probably the same with Kohli, and also Tendulkar going back a little bit. But I just think at IPL level, I would love to be in Chennai watching Dhoni walk out to bat or hit a six, late to seal the game.
So we would also love to have Kendel Fleming in yellow jersey somewhere down the line.
Oh yeah, I'd love to.
So you captained Japan in your debut game. And when did you know that you would be making your international and captaincy debut at the same time?
Yeah, so that was really exciting. As I said, I've been talking to the Japan Cricket Association since I was 18. So that was around 10 years ago. I first met them and touched base. And ever since then, I've been playing a little bit of cricket here and there in Japan. And I've been part of the national squad since 2019, I want to say, 2018 or 19. So it was quite a few years where I wasn't able to play any cricket for a few reasons. The pandemic obviously put a stop to a lot of the travel and any international cricket for some associate countries, including ourselves. And then, the first tournament that we were able to play was the sub-regional, but just before that we had the bilateral series against Indonesia. So I knew for a little bit that was going to be the first bit of cricket that we got to play for Japan. And in terms of being captain, I think we had 8 or 9 debuts in that game against Indonesia. It was a pretty fresh team from the last game that we played as a country in 2018 or 19. I
think that was the first T20I match that Japan played, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Officially.
Yeah. So we had played T20s prior to that, but they weren't given T20 international designation. So no, that was a really exciting day.
Before you even made your T20I debut, you were there with the Japan Under-19 team as the assistant coach. And it was the first time a cricket team from Japan had made it to an ICC event. What was the experience of the players and coaching team during the entire event?
Yeah, great experience on the whole. Obviously, on field, it was pretty difficult for some of our boys coming up against the likes of Jaiswal and Bishnoi for India and a bunch of other young cricketers that have gone on to become professionals. But for me as an assistant coach of that team, it was just wonderful to be able to witness some of the talent firsthand and to be able to go to a World Cup. I mean, there's not many people in Japan. Well, there's probably 15 people in Japan that can say that they've gone to a Cricket World Cup as players or staff. So really fortunate to have been on that trip, and hopefully for the players, as much as it was difficult on the field, they got something out of it because most of the boys were 15, 16 years old playing against the best 18-year-olds in the world. So it was a real shame that group of mostly 15 and 16-year-olds couldn't go to the next World Cup. The reasons for that were the pandemic, and for some reason the ICC ruled that Papua New Guinea should automatically qualify. But that would have been great to see that essentially that same group perform at the next World Cup, because there were huge improvements within that group. So yeah, they definitely got a lot out of it.
After the match against India, I think Japan played their first game in the Under-19 World Cup against India. Kento Dobel and Dhruv Jurel celebrated their birthday together. What was the environment in the dressing room after that celebration? We had a couple of photos of that celebration. Like cricketers from both the nations, like they were looking really happy. Although Japan had lost that game, but like the cricketers, they like totally enjoyed playing against India. So like, what was the environment in the dressing room?
Yeah, my recollections of that day aren't as good as they should be, because I had food poisoning. I was up all night that night. I was very sick, and I remember sitting up there and I was struggling. But I do remember that the feeling amongst the group was a lot more positive than it was against Sri Lanka. I think they lost a couple of days earlier. And we knew that we were coming up against probably the best youth cricket team in the world. And I rattled off a couple of the names before: Ravi Bishnoi, Yashasvi Jaiswal, Tyagi bowling probably in the 140s at that age. It was just like, we knew that we weren't going to win that game. But there were a couple of performances, our number 7 and 8, Kento Dobel and Max Clements, they hung around for a while. I think there was a boundary through point from our opener Shu. So there were little positives to draw from it. And then after the game, it was wonderful. I remember there was the cake there, and I think they ended up putting it into each other's faces. We got a great group photo, and that's a memory that those players will cherish forever.
Their parents are also there in that match.
Yeah.
Like you said something like the captain or the coach, they are not like called the captain or the coach, they are called big brother in the team. So like, is that a cultural thing in Japan, in the cricket team?
In Japan, it's a very respectful culture, but it's very much about respecting your elders. And sometimes it's, if you're younger than me, then get into line, you have to listen to me. But there are a couple of changes that I would love to make, and hopefully I have made them, in terms of younger players having a voice. I think that respect is paramount to us as a national team and as a national squad. We want to appeal to the Japanese public, but in saying that, the way that we play our cricket, I want us to be really competitive. We don't have to respect our elders on the opposition team. I mean, we respect any opponent and any player that we play against, but have the confidence that we might be coming up against some really good players, but we can beat them. We need to have that belief that we can win those games of cricket against good players. So I guess there are some cultural differences compared to some of the other full members that play cricket.
Tell us about the Japanese Shane Warne. You have called a player in your team the Japanese Shane Warne. Please tell us about him. Like, why did you call him the Japanese Shane Warne? Who is this bowler, first of all?
So his name is Makoto Taniyama. He's one of my best mates in the team. We actually share a birthday, the same day, same year. But the Japanese Shane Warne, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there is a little bit of a story behind it. So he was born in Kansai, one of the regions that I spoke about before, and he bowls leg spin, obviously, but he learned how to bowl leg spin by watching Shane Warne on YouTube. So it's amazing, because obviously in India or Australia or England, you go into junior programs or primary school, and there are coaches even from those levels. But in Japan, those things weren't afforded to him. So he learned how to bowl by watching YouTube clips, which I think is pretty amazing. So Shane Warne is his idol, and Tani has now taken the second most wickets for Japan ever, and he's on his way to becoming the greatest bowler of all time in Japan. So that's why he's the Japanese Shane Warne.
Yeah, obviously, like, tell us who is the leading wicket taker for Japan in T20Is.
In T20 eyes, I'm not sure, but we've got records for, across all the internationals that Japan's played. So obviously prior to us playing T20 eyes, we played 50 over cricket, and we also played T20s that didn't have that the international recognition. And I believe that the leading wicket taker across all formats is our current CEO, Naoki Miyagi. So that's a pretty cool little fact. But in terms of T20 internationals, I want to say that he'd be up there. Maybe our vice captain, Reo Sakurano Thomas, or Ibi Takahashi. I think there are a few guys that could be up there. But definitely a little bit of friendly and competitive drive within the team.
Who is your favorite captain overall? All-time favorite captain?
Oh wow, that's a tough one. Favorite captain as a fan of cricket? Do you mean? Yeah.
No, I mean like you have been the captain of the Japanese team for around 2 years. You have your experience of captaining teams in Australia. So like overall, who has been your favorite captain so far?
There's a couple of names that spring to mind, and the first one's Graham Smith from South Africa. I think he was a really courageous captain, and he got into that position young and really embraced it. And the second one has to be MS Dhoni. I touched on him before, but just his calmness, and despite what pressure there might be in a situation with a billion Indian supporters putting pressure on him, he always seems to be so calm, taking games to the last over. And as an Australian supporter, when I was younger, I was always worried when Dhoni was batting, because I knew that he would never be phased, and the chances were he would take it to the last over and then hit a couple of sixes and it would be game over. So I think he's someone that I love to channel his demeanor, I suppose.
Any favorite captaincy related memories that you have about Dhoni? Whatever like he has done so far.
Put me on the spot here. I recall there was a game in Australia. I can't remember if it was in Melbourne or Sydney, but it was like a 320 chase, I think, and I can't recall exactly the game, but he was going really slowly early, and I think he was like 60 off 100 or something like that, or maybe even 40 off 80, and he was getting booed in the crowd. I remember the crowd was jeering him, and then sure enough, he ended up being not out, winning it in the 49th or 50th over. And I just thought, like, and that's probably more to do with his batting than his captaincy specifically. But I just think that sort of encapsulates what I like about him.
Yeah, typical Dhoni behavior, taking the game till the last over.
Yeah, I noticed this year in the IPL, he's batted really low a couple of times, like batted 8.
So like will we be able to see Japan playing in the next T20 World Cup? I think in 2026.
Well, that's my goal. Yeah. So last time we finished short. We came second in the region to Papua New Guinea, but we had some good results along the way. We beat Vanuatu for the first time during that tournament. We beat the Philippines twice, who are a pretty decent team in the region. So it's definitely a goal for us as a squad, and I fully believe that as long as we keep working hard, then we'll give ourselves an opportunity.
You are someone like who is managing a lot of, like, you have a lot of things on your plate. Like you are working as a full-time, you have a full-time job, like you also have your own company. Also, like, you are the captain of the Japan team. So like, is there anything that you want to suggest to people like who looks to manage a couple of things at a single time?
And no, I mean, and that's coming from someone who definitely hasn't made it in any respect. I mean, I'm fortunate that I get to do some of these things, but I've got a long way to go in all those things. I've got goals as a player agent, and I've got goals that I've spoken to you about as captain of the Japan team. But hopefully over the next few years, I can continue to grow in both aspects.
Yeah, so like Kendel, you have an Indian connection in your own company, and like I would like to talk about that. So you helped Nikhil Chaudhary a player who was a part of the Punjab uh, team a few years ago. So, like, how did you help him to sign his first professional contract? What exactly was the process?
Yeah, so that's another pretty cool and unique story for Nikhil. That relationship started at Norths also. He came over from India for a holiday, I believe, and then couldn't leave because of the pandemic.
COVID.
So he ended up staying here for nearly 4 years in the end before he could go back to India, which is where he is now. But in terms of how he got the contract, he was a really consistent performer for my club Norths for quite a few years. He got the interest of a couple of franchises in the Big Bash through his performances in the T20 Max, which is in Brisbane. And James Hope was our coach for Norths in the T20 Max competition, who's I believe he's an assistant for the Delhi Capitals at the moment. But he was our coach.
Yeah, he was the assistant coach.
He was over there in some capacity this year, but anyway,
Yes.
he was also the assistant of the Hobart Hurricanes, and so that connection, James was really good in recommending Nikhil to that franchise. And in terms of the pathway to him becoming a domestic player, because he did his 3 years in Australia, he became eligible to represent Australia essentially. And despite being an Indian player, the length of time that he was in Australia meant that he could sign on as a local player. So really great for him to get that opportunity, and he did quite well in his first season, and then signed a 3-year extension following that. So no, really positive.